The chamber of the Zoran High Council was silent, save for the hum of energy coursing through the grand pillars that lined the room. The walls, adorned with ancient markings, seemed to glow faintly under the dim blue light. Vale Thurn, High Executor of the Dominion, stood at the center, his piercing golden eyes scanning the gathered officials. Behind him, a holographic projection flickered to life, an image of a barren battlefield. Scattered across the blood-stained ground were twisted pieces of alien war machines, their armor torn open, as if by some unseen force. The bodies of fallen soldiers, their scaled skin charred and broken, lay in unnatural positions. This was not a battlefield. It was a slaughter, ***. Vale Thurn turned to face the council, his voice cold and sharp. This is the work of humanity. A murmur spread through the chamber. Some of the council members leaned forward, their long, slender fingers tightening around their armrests. Others exchanged nervous glances. Humanity, the species that had clawed its way into the stars far too quickly, according to Dominion records. A gray-skinned official, Counselor Zelvan, let out a scoff. "They are primitive," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "Barely a step above savages." Vale Thurn narrowed his eyes. "Are they?" He gestured toward the floating display, which shifted to show a new image, one far more disturbing. A recording from a capture battle drone. The video was grainy, distorted by damage, but the events were unmistakable. A squad of Zoran warriors stood in formation, plasma rifles raised. Before them, a single human soldier, his uniform torn, blood dripping from a deep gash on his forehead. He was unarmed, outnumbered, doomed, and yet he laughed. The council chamber fell silent as the eerie sound echoed through the room. The human's voice was hoarse, filled with something no Zoran had ever heard from a dying enemy before, not desperation, not sorrow, amusement. The human took a step forward. The Zoran warriors flinched. Flinched, a species bred for war, trained in the art of combat from birth. ***, and they hesitated before a single wounded man, ***. The human tilted his head and spoke, his words chilling in their simplicity. "You think I'm afraid to die?" Then, without warning, he lunged. A mere 6 seconds later, the screen cut to static. The only record of what followed was the aftermath. The bodies of 5 Zoran warriors lying motionless, their weapons unused. The human, too, was dead, his hands still curled into fists. The silence in the council chamber deepened. Vale Thurn's voice was measured when he spoke again. "This is not an isolated incident." The hologram shifted once more, displaying battle after battle where humanity should have lost but didn't. They never surrendered. They never accepted defeat. And worst of all, ***, they adapted. Vale Thurn paced the chamber. "Our kind has fought countless species. We have crushed rebellions, conquered entire star systems. We know war." He stopped, his gaze dark. "And yet, against humanity, our strategies fail." "Why?" Silence. Counselor Vyrsak, one of the older members, shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we misunderstand them." Vale Thurn nodded. "Yes, we do. And that is why we must act. Now." He turned back to the council, his expression cold and unyielding. "Before humanity spreads further, before they become a true threat." Counselor Zelvan, still skeptical, folded his arms. "And what do you propose?" Vale Thurn's response was swift. "A full-scale invasion. We strike at the heart of their civilization and end this before they become unstoppable." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the council members began nodding. One by one, they signaled their approval. The decision was made. A war with humanity. Vale Thurn turned away, staring at the holographic map of the Sol sector, where Earth lay at the center. He did not know it yet, but he had just made the greatest mistake in the history of the galaxy. The ISS Behemoth floated in the dark abyss of space, its massive steel hull reflecting the cold glow of distant stars. It was not the largest ship in the fleet, nor the most advanced. But to those who served aboard it, it was something far greater. It was a symbol of defiance, a fortress in the void, and the heart of humanity's war machine. Inside the command center, Commander Elias Kane stood with his arms crossed, eyes locked on the holographic war map before him. A cluster of red lights marked the incoming Zoran invasion force, a wave of ships large enough to crush entire planets. Around them, in white and blue, were scattered human fleets, outnumbered and outgunned. A lesser commander might have seen this as a hopeless battle. Kane, however, saw an opportunity. The room was silent, save for the hum of computers and the soft crackle of incoming transmissions. His officers, seasoned veterans of past conflicts, waited for him to speak. They knew their commander well. He was not the kind of man to sugarcoat the truth, nor the kind to be rattled by the odds. Kane turned to his team. His voice, calm yet firm, cut through the silence. The Zorans think they've already won. A few officers exchanged glances. Lieutenant Rourke, the fleet strategist, cleared his throat. With respect, sir, they kind of have the numbers to back that up. Kane smirked. Numbers mean nothing if you don't know how to use them. He gestured to the map, highlighting key battle zones where the enemy was expected to advance. They fight with logic, precision, cold efficiency. Their strategies are perfect, on paper. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. That's why they'll lose. The officers listened intently as he continued. They don't understand us. They've never fought anything like us before. To them, war is a calculated game, controlled, predictable. They expect us to surrender when we should, to retreat when we're losing, to fight like every other species they've conquered. Kane paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. But we're human, and humans? We fight dirty. A chuckle rippled through the room, but there was no humor in it. Kane zoomed in on Proxima Outpost, the site of the enemy's first planned attack. They'll come in strong, confident. They'll follow their usual doctrine. Overwhelm us with superior firepower. Force us into submission. His fingers tapped against the console, pulling up a schematic of the battlefield. That's where we break them. Rourke furrowed his brow. How? Kane's smirk widened. We hit them where it hurts. Fear. He tapped another button, revealing human attack patterns. Erratic, unpredictable, brutal. We don't fight for survival. We fight to make them regret ever challenging us. His gaze swept the room. We use psychological warfare. No clean battles. No straightforward engagements. Every encounter will feel like a nightmare to them. The officers leaned in, eager to hear more. We play dead, then strike when they think it's over. He pointed at an ambush location. We force them into tight spaces where their numbers work against them. Another marker lit up. We let them win small battles, just to make them think they have the upper hand, then rip it away from them. Kane turned to Major Vasquez, leader of the ground forces. Your men will capture prisoners. Not for information. For fear. The Zorans need to see what happens when they cross us. Vasquez nodded grimly. We'll make sure they remember. Kane took a deep breath, then spoke his final words of the briefing. The Zorans fight for victory. We fight so that no one will ever dare challenge us again. Silence filled the room. Then one by one the officers nodded. The plan was set. The galaxy was about to learn why humans were the most terrifying warriors it had ever seen. A deep silence hung over the cold void of space. Stars shimmered in the distance, distant and indifferent to the war about to unfold. Proxima Outpost, a small but strategically vital human colony, floated against the backdrop of its red dwarf sun. It wasn't much, just a cluster of orbital platforms, defensive turrets, and a population of about 15,000. But today, it would become the graveyard of an empire's arrogance. Commander Elias Kane stood on the bridge of the ISS Behemoth, his sharp eyes locked onto the holographic display before him. The enemy fleet was closing in fast, 40 Zoran warships, sleek and deadly, moving in perfect formation. Their leader, Admiral Carvas, was known for his precision, his reliance on calculated strikes and overwhelming numbers. Kane smirked. Let them think they have the advantage. He turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Asher Valen. Are the mining freighters in position? Valen gave a firm nod. Yes, sir. All automated. All ready. Kane exhaled slowly. The Zorans had never fought humans before. They thought war was about numbers, strategy, and logic. But humans fought differently. They fought with madness, with desperation, with a willingness to destroy everything, including themselves, if it meant victory. Tonight, the Zorans would learn what it meant to fight a species that refused to break. Admiral Carvas stood in the command chamber of his flagship, the ZDS Valaris, watching the battle unfold through his tactical display. The Proxima outpost defenses were laughable. Only a handful of outdated turrets and a few human destroyers. He almost pitied them. This would be a quick, bloodless conquest. Admiral, a Zoran officer reported, the humans are retreating. Their ships are scattering. Carvas bared his fangs in amusement. Cowards, he had studied their history, tribal conflicts, planetary wars, primitive and emotional. He had expected resistance, at least some foolish last stand. Instead, they ran. Order the fleet forward, he commanded. Take the outpost intact. The Zoran warships surged ahead, confident, unstoppable. And then, the freighters moved. They seemed harmless. Old, rust-covered mining vessels drifting aimlessly. Carvas barely spared them a glance. But then, before his eyes, the freighters ignited in massive, controlled explosions. Blazing fire and metal shards erupted in all directions. Hidden explosives, rigged for maximum damage. 2 Zoran cruisers at the front of the formation took direct hits. Their shields flickered, then failed. One ship spun out of control, smashing into another. And suddenly, chaos, ambush, an officer shouted. It's a trap. Carvas felt his stomach tighten. The humans weren't running. They were leading them into a slaughter. From the darkness of space, human warships emerged. Not in formation, not in order, but in madness. They didn't attack like a disciplined fleet. They came at the Zorans from every direction, moving unpredictably, some even on collision courses. The ISS Reaper, a smaller destroyer, cut directly into enemy ranks, crashing itself into a Zoran battleship. Explosions bloomed from the impact. And then, boarding pods. Humans, armed and armored, poured into the enemy ship like demons clawing into hell. Sir, one of Carvas's officers gasped. They're fighting on the ships. Carvas couldn't believe what he was seeing. Zoran warfare was precise, tactical, controlled. But these humans, they fought like they had nothing to lose, One human frigate launched every single escape pod toward the enemy fleet. The Zorans hesitated. Was it a surrender? A desperate escape? No. The pods detonated, suicide bombs ripping through shields and hulls. The battle was turning into something monstrous. Aboard the behemoth, Kane watched everything unfold with cold satisfaction. The Zorans were panicking. Good. Open a channel to their flagship, he said. Seconds later, the flickering blue form of Admiral Carvas appeared on the holographic screen. Behind him, alarms blared. Smoke filled the bridge. You are violating intergalactic war conventions. Carvas spat. Your tactics are reckless, dishonorable. Surrender now, and we may still grant. Kane cut him off. You still don't understand, do you? His voice was calm, almost amused. We don't care about honor. We don't fight like you. We fight to win. Carvas's expression darkened. Kane leaned closer. Tell me, Admiral, how do you win a war against an enemy who isn't afraid to die? Silence. And then, in that silence, the behemoth fired its main cannon. A blinding beam of energy lanced through the Valaris, cutting through its core like a hot knife through flesh. Carvas's image flickered and vanished. The flagship detonated. What remained of the Zoran fleet turned and fled. In the aftermath, the Proxima outpost still stood. Humanity had lost ships, soldiers, but they had won something more valuable. Fear. The Zorans would tell stories of this battle. They would whisper about the humans who fought like demons, who threw themselves into death without hesitation, who laughed in the face of destruction. As the smoke cleared and the bodies drifted in the void, Kane turned to his crew. One battle down, he said. Now let's make sure they never forget it. Because this was only the beginning. The war was supposed to be easy. A species barely a few centuries into spaceflight should have been no match for the mighty Zoran Dominion. Yet, in every battle, the humans refused to break. The Zoran fleets, vast and technologically superior, had expected the humans to surrender once their ships were outnumbered. Instead, the humans fought harder. Now, Deep within the cold halls of the Zoran War Council, High Executor Vale Thurn sat in silence, staring at the reports before him. He had read them over and over, hoping he had misunderstood. But the truth was clear. The humans were not normal. Across from him, strategist Lyervox shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His 4 pale fingers traced the edge of a datapad, hesitating before he spoke. High Executor, I believe we have miscalculated, Lyervox finally admitted. Vale Thurn's golden eyes flickered toward him, unreadable. Miscalculated? That was an understatement. He leaned forward, his claws tapping against the metal table. Explain? Lyervox hesitated before pulling up a hollow screen. It flickered to life, showing a darkened cell on one of their prison ships. Inside, a human soldier sat, bound in energy restraints. He should have been terrified. He should have been begging for mercy. Instead, he was smiling. Vale Thurn's brow furrowed. Is this a prisoner interrogation? Lyervox nodded. Yes. Watch closely. The playback continued. A Zoran interrogator stepped forward, speaking in a cold, mechanical voice. Identify yourself. The human didn't answer. He just chuckled. A low, dry laugh like someone who knew a joke no one else did. The interrogator stepped closer, activating a pain stimulant through the prisoner's restraints. The human flinched but never screamed. Instead, his grin widened. Then, in a hoarse whisper, he spoke. You think you've won? He rasped. You think you're safe? The Zoran interrogator said nothing. The human leaned forward as far as his restraints would allow, his blue eyes burning with something unnatural. We don't fear death, he whispered. Do you? The recording ended. The war room was silent. Vale Thurn clenched his jaw. The cold certainty settled deep in his chest. The humans were not just fighting. They were playing a different game entirely. Lyervox swiped through more reports. There's more, he said grimly. Survivors from Proxima Outpost are reporting disturbing things. The holoscreen changed again. This time, it showed grainy footage from a Zoran warship. The camera was shaky, but the message was clear. Bodies floated in zero gravity. Drifting in the dark corridors, the ship was supposed to be secured. There should have been no human presence. And yet, the walls were smeared with something. At first, Vale Thurn thought it was just damage from the battle. But then he saw the markings. Symbols. Words. Scrawled in human blood. We are coming. Vale Thurn's hands tightened into fists. This was not war. This was something else, asterisk asterisk. What are they? Lyervox muttered under his breath. Vale Thurn didn't answer. But deep down, he feared he already knew. Humanity was not a warrior species. They were something worse, asterisk asterisk. They were survivors. And survivors had nothing to lose. The Zoran Dominion had always prided itself on its superior intellect and methodical strategies. The Zoran studied every aspect of warfare in cold, calculated detail. But nothing in their vast library of tactics had prepared them for human unpredictability. Commander Elias Kane had learned the value of fear long before he donned the uniform. As a young soldier, he had witnessed the brutal truth of warfare. Asterisk asterisk the mind is the most powerful weapon asterisk asterisk. And so, when the Zorans launched their assault, Kane decided to fight not just with weapons, but with fear itself. It started with simple, quiet disruptions. The Zorans, experts at space navigation, expected everything to run like clockwork. But suddenly, communication systems began to fail, one by one. Ships in their fleet were reporting strange malfunctions, and systems were being hacked, giving false information about the enemy's locations. Kane didn't need to fire a single shot. He was already inside their heads. At Vagub 9 Station, a quiet, unassuming human outpost, a distress signal was sent to the Zoran fleet. The message was brief. We're surrounded. Please help us. The Zorans, eager for a swift victory, rushed to the location, only to find an empty station, floating in the cold void of space. There was no enemy, no distress, just silence. Kane had planted that message knowing full well the Zorans would come rushing in, wasting precious resources. But this was only the beginning. Deceptive maneuvers were Kane's next tactic. He ordered a fleet of Terran ships to play dead. For days, the Zorans monitored these ships as they appeared to be abandoned, floating aimlessly in space. The Zorans assumed they had outsmarted humanity, believing the ships were easy prey. But when the Zorans boarded the ships, they found their worst nightmare waiting. Booby traps. Hidden behind every bulkhead, inside every compartment, were explosive devices, all rigged to detonate at the slightest disturbance. No one died. Not yet. The Zorans would later claim they had captured the ships, but they could never shake the feeling of being followed. Every movement made them wonder what was waiting for them around the corner. Humanity's message to the Zorans was clear. Asterisk, you think you have control. You have no idea how far we'll go to make you question everything, asterisk. For Kane, it wasn't about the battles or the strategy. It was about making the enemy so terrified of their own mistakes that they would lose before the war even began. He knew how easy it was to destroy a soldier's confidence, to make them doubt the very reality around them. Fear of the unknown was the deadliest weapon in any war. Aboard the ISS Behemoth, Kane spoke to his officers in a cold, calculated tone. We are not just fighting to win. We are fighting to make sure they never forget who we are. Meanwhile, the Zoran fleet, once so confident in their technological superiority, began to unravel. Fear was creeping into their minds. Zoran soldiers started to report strange dreams, visions of human faces, twisted in silent grins. At night, they would hear phantom footsteps echoing in the halls of their ships. And then, there was the psychological warfare broadcasted across the enemy lines. It wasn't a military message, nor a threat. It was simply a recording, an innocuous-sounding transmission from one of their own soldiers, one who had been captured. The soldier spoke of his capture, how the humans had tortured him, and yet he laughed. I don't fear death, the soldier said, his voice steady and calm. But I'll tell you this, Zorans. If you dare to come for us, you will never, ever leave the battlefield. We are not afraid, and we fight without mercy. The Zorans listened, and they began to fear what they could not understand. Humanity wasn't like them. They didn't fight for honor. They fought because they had nothing to lose, and that made them the most terrifying force in the galaxy. The whispers began. Zoran soldiers started to speak of the human curse. The idea that any human soldier could go into battle with nothing but sheer will, throwing themselves into the fray without hesitation, without fear. This terrified them. Even the mightiest of the Zoran warlords began to question, what are we truly fighting? The real war was being fought not on the front lines, but inside the minds of the Zoran commanders. Every moment they spent thinking they were winning, Kane's psychological traps dragged them deeper into paranoia. By the time the Zorans realized it, it was too late. Their fleet was scattered, disoriented, and in full retreat. They couldn't pinpoint why they had failed. Was it the human unpredictability? The constant traps? The sense that something unseen was watching them? Or was it the haunting knowledge that humanity, a species thought to be weak, had turned the entire galaxy into a battlefield of fear? Kane's tactics were simple but effective. Make them doubt. Make them fear their own thoughts. Make them question whether survival was even possible. The Zorans were experts in technology and warfare, but humanity had something far darker, the power of psychological warfare. And it was something the Zorans couldn't hope to understand, let alone defeat. The Zoran fleet approached the moon with confidence. They had been told that Luna Base, Earth's primary defense station, would be an easy target. For years, it had served as a bastion of humanity's technological advances in space. But in the grand scale of the war, it was a small base, nothing to fear. Or so they thought. Commander Elias Kane watched the Zoran ships on the radar as they closed in on Luna. His mind was calm, but underneath, there was a storm of strategy brewing. He had planned this moment for weeks. Luna was not just a base, it was a trap, and the Zorans had no idea they were walking straight into it. The fleet's guns powered up as they prepared to launch their first wave of attacks. They were precise, their weapons designed to punch through the toughest shields and crack even the sturdiest hulls. The Zorans had brought their best, a fleet of heavy cruisers, elite fighters, and weapons they believed humanity couldn't hope to withstand. But Kane wasn't concerned. He had already anticipated their every move. He had designed Luna Base to look like a defenseless target. He had intentionally weakened certain areas, making them look like easy points of attack. It was bait, and the Zorans couldn't resist. "Activate the gravity wells," Kane ordered, his voice steady but filled with the quiet intensity of a man who knew exactly what was about to happen. The gravity wells were the final piece of the plan. Embedded deep in the surface of Luna, hidden from the Zoran scanners, were massive engines that could distort the moon's gravity field. When activated, they would pull objects in low orbit with unimaginable force. The Zorans entered their attack formation, firing their weapons at the vulnerable points they had detected on Luna's surface. For a moment, everything seemed ordinary. There was the bright flash of laser beams and explosions. Human fighters scrambled to defend Luna, but their numbers were small compared to the overwhelming Zoran force. Then, just as the first wave of Zoran fighters closed in on their target, Luna Base's hidden gravity wells flared to life. At first it was subtle, a small shift in the gravitational pull, but that small shift grew rapidly, pulling at the Zoran ships with growing strength. The fighters, designed to move quickly in space, were suddenly caught in a tidal force they couldn't escape. They tumbled out of control as the moon's gravity clawed at them. Some Zoran ships were sucked into the gravitational vortex, their systems overloaded, their hulls torn apart as they were dragged into the moon's dense core. "Asterisk, what is happening?" "Asterisk," the Zoran fleet commander shouted, his voice trembling with disbelief. But it was too late. The gravity wells were not just pulling ships toward the moon. They were turning the entire battle upside down. Human ships that had been waiting in the shadows used the confusion to strike. They swooped down from high orbit, attacking from unexpected angles. The Zorans tried to retaliate, but their fighters were disoriented and crippled by the gravity shifts. The human fleet, smaller but relentless, hammered their opponents with precise shots that breached shields and punctured hulls. Kane watched the destruction unfold on his screens. The Zoran fleet was no longer fighting for victory. They were fighting for survival. The once proud warships now seemed helpless as they struggled to escape the moon's pull, their attempts futile against the overwhelming forces at play. The human commanders, following Kane's orders to the letter, didn't hesitate. Every attack, every maneuver, was calculated to weaken and demoralize the Zoran invaders. The humans weren't just trying to win, they were trying to make the Zorans wish they had never come. Zoran ships, once powerful and fearsome, began to break apart in space. The scattered remains of their fleet drifted in the cold, empty void, like the carcasses of animals left to rot. Their escape routes were cut off. Their weapons were useless. They were nothing but prey now. Kane's voice came through the comms. "Asterisk, make sure they know who they're fighting. No mercy, asterisk." A squadron of human bombers dropped their payloads, devastating what remained of the Zoran armada. The blasts were deafening, the shockwaves rippling through space as the Zoran ships cracked and disintegrated, falling into the gravity well's crushing grip. And then, as the last of the Zoran forces scattered, Kane gave the final order. "Asterisk, send a message, asterisk." A transmission was broadcast across the entire Zoran fleet, an image of the ruined ships, the broken bodies drifting in the cold. It was a grim reminder, a warning, a signature move. The transmission flickered to life, and Kane's calm voice rang out. "Asterisk, did you really think we were weak? We fight not for victory. We fight so no one dares challenge us again." Asterisk. The silence that followed was thick with dread. By the time the Zorans realized what had happened, it was too late. Luna Base had become a graveyard for their pride, and a testament to humanity's terrifying ability to turn the tables in the blink of an eye. The massacre was complete. The Zorans had learned the hard way. Never underestimate a species that has nothing to lose. And humanity? They simply moved on to the next challenge, as if the massacre had been just another day in the war. But the galaxy would never forget what they had seen. The vast expanse of space was eerily quiet, stretching endlessly in all directions. The silence was broken only by the hum of the Zoran warships as they advanced through the void, their sleek black hulls glinting under distant stars. These ships, which once seemed unstoppable, now moved with a heavy, almost reluctant pace. High Executor Valethurn stood at the bridge of his flagship, the Vanguard, his eyes fixed on the holographic map of Earth's system. He had led his forces across countless systems, battling against civilizations far more advanced than humanity. Yet, now, facing the final showdown with Earth, something gnawed at him, something unsettling. Executor, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was General Vecker, his most trusted officer. We are approaching Earth's gravity well. Our fleet is in position. The humans have made no move to intercept. Valethern didn't answer immediately. His eyes narrowed. Why weren't they resisting? Humanity's persistence in battle had always been their most dangerous weapon. But now, silence. It was unnatural. Deploy the fleets, Valethern commanded, his voice cold and calculating. We end this here? The Zoran fleet began to spread out in formation. The alien ships, their dark outlines stark against the deep black of space, advanced toward Earth. The Vanguard, the lead ship, broke through the last barrier of defense, the asteroid field near the Kuiper Belt, and made its way to Earth's atmosphere. Valethern stood motionless, staring at the holographic projection of Earth. The blue planet, glowing softly in the vast emptiness of space, seemed so fragile, so innocent. And yet, the humans, those strange, unpredictable creatures, had turned this world into a thorn in the side of the galaxy. A thorn that had to be removed. Send the first wave, Valethern ordered again, his voice unwavering. The first wave of Zoran landing craft surged forward, their engines flaring as they cut through the void, heading straight for Earth's surface. Zoran troops, clad in sleek, reflective armor, readied themselves for the assault. But something fell off. Even as the warships descended, Valethern couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. On the ground below, Commander Elias Kane stood in the war room of the ISS Behemoth, his hands clasped behind his back. The room was filled with his senior officers, all silently waiting for his orders. Kane had been waiting for this moment for months. The Zorans thought they had outsmarted him. They believed the humans would fight with conventional tactics, blockade, defense, desperate resistance. But Kane was no ordinary strategist. He had something far more dangerous in mind. Ready the defense protocols, Kane said, his voice low but sharp. Let them come. The human forces had set a trap for the Zoran fleet. Not a physical one, not yet, but a psychological one. The Earth's defenses appeared weak, almost non-existent. No massive fleet waiting in orbit. No long-range artillery. In fact, the humans had intentionally spread misinformation, allowing the Zorans to think the planet was ripe for the taking. As the Zoran fleet drew closer to Earth, they encountered no resistance at all. The first wave of landing crafts landed on Earth's surface, only to be greeted by eerie silence. Valethern's fleet entered the upper atmosphere, preparing to launch their ground assault. But as they descended through the clouds, they saw nothing but a desolate landscape. No military presence, no major structures. Just empty fields and deserted cities. Were they? A signal from the Vanguard sensors flared up. An anomaly. A gravitational disturbance. Valethern's eyes widened as the realization hit him too late. The gravity well, the planet's own pull on their ships, was being used against them. Without warning, an enormous gravitational force grabbed the Zoran ships, pulling them off course. They were trapped in Earth's orbit, unable to escape the force of its pull. For the first time, the Zorans felt the terrifying power of their own weakness. Humanity had set a trap, and they had walked straight into it. The Zoran fleet was caught in Earth's gravity. Ships were now at the mercy of human weaponry they hadn't expected. Massive weapons hidden in orbit came to life. Laser beams ripped through the sky, tearing apart Zoran warships with brutal efficiency. Valethern's eyes flashed with anger as he saw his fleet start to disintegrate. He roared in disbelief, but his words were lost in the chaos. The humans had not just prepared for battle. They had prepared for the fear they would instill in their enemies. They had prepared to remind the galaxy who was truly in charge. Kane watched from the behemoth as the Zoran ships were shredded by Earth's gravity and orbital defenses. His lips curled into a grim smile. This was more than just a victory. It was a message. The Zorans had misunderstood them. Humans didn't fight with precision. They didn't fight with logic. They fought to make the enemy regret ever stepping foot in their system. Back on the ground, General Vecker watched in horror as the fleet was torn apart. A final transmission from Valethurn echoed through the communications channels. "We will never surrender. You cannot win." The words were followed by the shrill sound of static. Then silence. Valethurn's flagship, the Vanguard, drifted in space, its systems failing one by one. The Zoran forces had no way to escape. Earth's gravity held them firmly in place, like an iron fist clutching a helpless prey. As the last Zoran ships fell, a sense of cold finality settled over the battlefield. The galaxy would never forget this day. The humans had proved it, once and for all. They were the most terrifying warriors the galaxy had ever known. The Zoran Empire, once thought invincible, was now shattered, its arrogance crushed under the weight of their own disbelief. The battle had begun, but it wasn't the kind of battle the Zorans expected. They thought they were going to crush humanity once and for all. But as their fleet dropped out of warp, entering the final stretch toward Earth, something was wrong. The ships were silent, their engines humming softly as they approached the blue planet. The vast expanse of space was eerily calm. No resistance. No human ships waiting to meet them. It felt off. High Executor Valethurn stood at the front of the command deck of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath. His eyes narrowed, scanning the empty space ahead. Where were the humans? Why weren't they fighting? The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. "Commander, we have visual confirmation of Earth," a Zoran officer said, breaking the quiet. The officer's voice was tense, unsure. Valethurn didn't answer. His eyes remained locked on the planet. It was beautiful, serene, like nothing had ever touched it, as if the human world wasn't in the middle of a war. It was too quiet. Then, the silence shattered. Hundreds of bright flashes exploded across space, almost blinding. Zoran ships scattered, trying to avoid the incoming barrage. But it was too late. The human forces had already prepared. A swarm of human kamikaze drones came from nowhere, launching themselves like missiles, slamming into the sides of Zoran ships with explosive force. They weren't sophisticated machines. They were just simple drones designed to die, to tear apart anything in their path. "All units, retaliate," Valethurn shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos. Zoran ships started firing back, but the drones were relentless, pushing forward with the speed of desperation. Then it hit. The gravity well. The Zoran fleet had no idea what was coming. The gravity around Earth had always been a natural force, something that simply was, but humanity had learned to use it. And they had set up something powerful. Suddenly, several Zoran ships, too focused on the drones, found themselves unable to escape Earth's pull. The ships jerked, grinding to a halt as Earth's gravity reached out like an invisible hand, yanking them toward the planet's surface. It was a trap. "No," Valethurn growled, watching as his ships were pulled toward Earth like helpless insects caught in a spider's web. They tried to fire their engines to break free, but it was no use. Zoran warships collided with each other, their hulls twisting and breaking under the immense pressure. Some were torn apart as they crashed into each other, and others were dragged into orbit, helpless, grinding against the atmosphere. The Zorans had no choice but to try and turn the tide quickly. But before they could regroup, a new wave of human forces appeared. This time, they weren't drones. Terran fighters soared into the battle, moving like sleek, predatory birds. They were small and fast, designed for pure combat. Their weapons ripped into the Zoran defenses, leaving holes in their shields and armor. The Zorans fired back, but human pilots had mastered the art of unpredictability. It wasn't just their technology that made them dangerous. It was their spirit. "Deploy the ground forces," Valethurn ordered. He had to take control, to remind himself that victory was still within reach. But he was wrong. As Zoran ground troops descended onto Earth's surface, they were met by something they never expected. The humans didn't wait for them to land. They fought back immediately, not with traditional military force, but with tactics that were completely foreign to the Zorans. Human soldiers charged out of nowhere, using the planet's terrain, hiding in forests and cities, appearing from the shadows. They didn't fight like soldiers, they fought like predators. They ambushed the Zorans from every direction, attacking with ferocity and unpredictability. The Zorans were used to calculated attacks, to precision. But the humans? They fought without rules, without fear. "We've underestimated them," Valethern whispered under his breath, his voice filled with disbelief. And that was the moment he understood. Humanity didn't just fight for survival. They fought to break the will of their enemy, to turn victory into something terrifying. They didn't want to conquer. They wanted to destroy the idea that anyone could ever challenge them again. The battle continued, but it was no longer a fight for victory. It was a fight for the very soul of the galaxy. Valethern could feel it. The Zorans were losing their will to fight. Even as their ships were destroyed, even as their soldiers fell, they could not overcome the terror that humans instilled in them. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. It was a war of attrition, and the Zorans were learning the hardest lesson of all. Humanity didn't just survive war. They owned it. The shattered remnants of the Zoran fleet drifted in the cold expanse of space, their once mighty ships now nothing more than floating carcasses. The bright lights of distant stars flickered like the dying embers of a long-lost fire. A deafening silence hung in the air, as if the universe itself held its breath, watching the final moments of a war that no one expected to end this way. Commander Elias Kane stood at the helm of the ISS Behemoth, his eyes cold, focused. Yet there was something deeper there, a quiet satisfaction. It had been a brutal, bloody campaign, and in the end, the Zorans were broken. They had come to Earth with their grand fleet, ready to crush humanity beneath their advanced weapons and calculated strategies. But they hadn't counted on one thing: humanity's refusal to fight like anything they had ever known. "We've won, Commander," Lieutenant Nara said softly from her station, her voice almost a whisper. The battle was over, and the Zorans were in full retreat. But there was still something else, something Kane had been waiting for. He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Not yet," he said, his voice low but steady. "We have one final message to send." Nara looked at him, confused but didn't argue. She knew Kane better than anyone. When he spoke like that, there was no room for questioning. He stepped forward, his boots echoing across the metal floor of the bridge. The crew worked around him, their eyes on their consoles, waiting for his command. With a swift motion, Kane activated the ship's communications array. A soft hum filled the room as the system powered up, connecting to the Zoran communication network. It wasn't much. They had managed to break through some of their encryption during the battle, but it was enough. Enough to send one final message, one that would reach across the stars, shattering the Zorans' hope of ever rebuilding. The bridge fell silent. All eyes turned toward the screen as Kane stood before it. On the display, a black void stared back, like the empty space that now lay between two warring species. Kane's face appeared on the screen, his expression stone-cold. The words were simple, yet they would be remembered forever. "You thought we fought to win? No. We fought so no one would ever challenge us again." The message was direct, unrelenting. There was no victory dance, no hollow speeches about peace. Just those words, echoing through the Zoran fleet's shattered comm systems. They were a warning, a declaration. As soon as the transmission ended, the room remained still. The silence was almost unbearable. The Zorans, whoever was left among them, would hear it, and they would understand what it meant. The war was not just over. It was over because humanity had decided it was. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the comm officer turned to Kane. "The Zoran fleet is retreating, Commander. There are no more signals. It's done." Kane's gaze softened, but only for a second. His fingers hovered over the console, checking for confirmation. There would be no retaliation. The Zorans had received their message loud and clear. "We're not just survivors," Kane said quietly to himself, more to the crew than anyone else. "We are the last species anyone will dare to challenge. Ever again." And with that, the tension in the room slowly began to dissipate. The crew let out breaths they hadn't realized they were holding. The war was over, but the echoes of it would linger in the galaxy forever. The screen flickered, showing a map of the galaxy. The Zoran fleets were gone. All that remained was the terrifying truth that humanity had carved a place for itself, a place where no one, no empire, no species would dare to test them. As Kane turned away from the screen, Nara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of awe and disbelief. "What now, Commander?" Kane's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Now we wait. The galaxy will come to us, and they'll know. If they want peace, they'll have to respect us." The war was over. Humanity had won. And now, the galaxy would have to live with the terrifying truth. They would never forget why humans were the most dangerous species in the stars. And somewhere, deep in the reaches of space, a lone Zoran ship, one of the last survivors, sent a final, broken message back to their homeworld. It was simple, but it carried the weight of 1,000 crushed hopes. Asterisk, humanity is the galaxy's most terrifying warrior species. Asterisk, the stars flickered on, silent witnesses to a new era. The distant moon floated quietly in the vast emptiness of space, its surface marked only by scars of ancient impacts. A cold wind, non-existent, but felt in the stillness of the airless rock, whispered through the silence. High Executor Valethern sat alone in a decrepit command chair, his regal armor reflecting the soft glow of a single dying star. His empire had crumbled, his fleet shattered, and his reputation as a feared war tactician reduced to dust. Now, he was nothing more than a broken relic of the past, a survivor in a galaxy that no longer feared him. The Zoran Dominion, once mighty and untouchable, had collapsed under the weight of humanity's savage resilience. For years, Valethern had planned for every contingency, every possible angle of attack, and yet, nothing had prepared him for the sheer brutality of the human spirit. They had fought like creatures with nothing to lose, not for victory, but to ensure that the galaxy would never dare cross them again. It was a strategy so alien, so terrifying, that even his seasoned mind couldn't fathom it until it was too late. Valethern's fingers trembled as he reached for the console in front of him, the image of Earth's shattered defenses still vivid in his mind. It had been beautiful, in a way. The final battle had been brutal, a raw display of violence. He had led the last of his fleet into the heart of human territory, thinking that if he could just strike down the heart of the Terran forces, it would be over. But instead, he had walked straight into a trap. The memory of the kamikaze drones, those cursed machines, haunted him. They had come in swarms, relentless and suicidal, each one designed not to fight for survival, but to spread destruction. Zoran ships had been ripped apart as if they were paper. No matter how many ships they sent, no matter how advanced their technology, they couldn't stop the chaos humanity had unleashed upon them. And when the dust had settled, the last of the Zoran fleet had retreated, broken and scattered like leaves in a storm. Valethern shut his eyes. The sound of humanity's victory was not the roar of celebration, but a chilling silence, a warning to anyone who might consider challenging them in the future. His own people, once proud and untouchable, now cowered in the shadow of humanity's terrifying resilience. The console blinked, signaling an incoming transmission. Valethern's eyes shot open, his heart skipping a beat. A Terra message, the last thing he wanted to hear. He hesitated for only a moment before activating the transmission. The screen flickered to life, and there, standing in stark contrast to the sterile, calculating Zoran features, was a human, Commander Elias Kane. Valethern had seen his face on countless holovids, each one more chilling than the last. Kane's face was gaunt, lined with the scars of battle, but there was no mistaking the steely resolve in his eyes. Kane's voice came through, cold and direct. "High Executor Valethern, I hope this message finds you well, or as well as a failure can." Valethern's jaw clenched. He was not a creature of emotions, but anger surged through him like a tide. He forced himself to remain calm. The human didn't deserve a response. But Kane wasn't finished. "You see, Valethern, we never fought to win. We fought because we wanted the galaxy to understand something. To understand that there are no limits to what we'll do to ensure that no one ever challenges us again." Kane's voice dropped to a low, almost amused tone. Victory wasn't the goal. Fear was. Valethern's heart stuttered in his chest. Fear that was what humans had instilled in the galaxy. He had underestimated them. He had thought their strategy would be a quick, decisive battle. Instead, they had waged a war of terror, and now it was his empire that had been wiped from existence. Kane leaned closer to the camera, as if speaking directly to Vale Thurn, though they were galaxies apart. The galaxy will never forget what we've done, Vale Thurn. You didn't just lose a battle. You lost the war before you even began. Humanity doesn't need to conquer the stars. We already own them. You just didn't know it yet. Vale Thurn's vision blurred for a moment. The weight of Kane's words crushed him, harder than any weapon ever could. He had built his entire existence around the idea of domination, of holding power over the galaxy with sheer force. But the humans, they had fought in a way no one had ever imagined. They fought with the belief that survival wasn't enough. They fought to break their enemies, to make them see that defiance was futile. As the transmission ended, Vale Thurn sat motionless, the hum of the console filling the silence around him. His empire was gone. His name would be lost to history, not as a conqueror, but as a fool who had dared to challenge the most terrifying warrior species the galaxy had ever known. His thoughts turned to the future. What would happen now? The galaxy had learned one undeniable truth. Humans were unstoppable. The rest of the galaxy would be forced to negotiate with them, to bow to their terms, for no one could afford to face the wrath of a species that knew no bounds. Vale Thurn took a deep breath and slowly stood, his legs weak beneath him. There was nothing left to do but wait. The silence of the moon seemed to stretch on forever, and yet, in his mind, he could still hear Kane's final words. Asterisk, you forced us to remind the galaxy why we're the last species you should ever provoke. Asterisk. The last survivor of the Zoran Dominion lowered his head, knowing that the terror of humanity would echo through the stars long after he was gone.